Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on AI transformation in the insurance industry. We're absolutely thrilled to have all of you joining us from around the world. Whether you're tuning in from your office, working from home, or catching this during your commute, we really appreciate you taking the time to be here with us today. Over the next 20 to 30 minutes, we're going to deep dive into how AI is completely revolutionizing the insurance industry landscape, from streamlining claims processing, enhancing customer service, to transforming underwriting, fraud detection, and so on. We'll also share some practical, actionable strategies that you can actually implement in your own organization, regardless of where you are in your AI journey. So grab your coffee, get some snacks, get comfortable, and let's explore the exciting future of insurance together. Before moving forward, let me introduce myself first. My name is Prashanth Krishnamoorthy. You can call me PK. I lead the growth function here at qBotica, based in Atlanta, Georgia. Prior to joining qBotica, where I've been for a year now, I was with UiPath for nearly 5 years, leading the professional services practice. Prior to UiPath, I was with a bunch of consulting firms, Deloitte, Ernst & Young, Cognizant, and so on. So it's a pleasure to be here with you today. With me, I have Chris. Chris, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, PK. Pleasure to be here. Pleasure to have this opportunity to speak with all of you. As PK said, I'm Chris Frankland, founder of InsurTech360, InsurTech360.com. I've been around insurance for quite a long time. Been around technology for even longer, probably 20 plus years. That has taken me from London to New York City to now Lincoln, Nebraska. My background primarily has always been around technology, thinking about and building customer-facing applications. I was a full stack developer for many years. I feel like that's always put me in good stead for talking about innovation and technology. But I've worked across many verticals: Major League Baseball, Random House, Standard & Poor's. My first job out of university was with a company, lastminute.com, which went to sell to Travelocity. It's probably one of the best experiences I've had early in my career, and ultimately have been around the insurtech space for 7 or 8 years, having been with a carrier in Lincoln, Nebraska, emeritus for 3.5 to 4 years. So in addition to that, I've spent significant time with a couple of BPO offshore companies, Resource Pro. I ran the Global Innovation Lab for 3 years, and more recently CoverDesk, a virtual assistant company where I was head of product for 2 years as well. So quite a varied background, PK. But ultimately, just seeing this journey evolve around innovation and technology. And I know we say this time and time again, but I think this really is a unique time to be around technology. I think it has become democratized to the point that any of us can really go and build something, right? I talked about being an engineer and so forth, but we now have the tools to ultimately go and execute and take ideas to implementation in perhaps the most streamlined and efficient way than that we've ever been able to do. So I'm rambling, but anyway, just good to be here and to talk to you about this topic.
Wow, excellent. Thank you so much for your time today, Chris. You have a very varied background, unique set of talents. So, you've seen the tech industry and the insurance industry kind of evolve over the years. So let me start by asking you this question, right? We all know that AI is impacting all of us in some shape or form or the other in our everyday lives. How is it impacting, or how has it impacted the insurance industry over the last, let's say, 2 to 5 years? Starting with RPA and then moving to hyper automation and then Gen AI and now full stack AI. What kind of evolution have you seen in the last few years?
Yeah, that's quite a broad question for sure, PK. I think going back to the earlier days, perhaps of the time I spent with a carrier and having gone through and experienced the pain points within a kind of, perhaps a more legacy type infrastructure. I think, we looked at RPA, robotic process automation, for folks who don't know what that is, as almost kind of like it was almost like the classic Band-Aid for, being able to stitch together siloed or disparate applications and platforms. Back then I've been around IBM technology for quite a number of years. So thinking about, we were automating to some extent workflows 10 or 15 years ago, using platforms like Message Broker, very early SOAP-based web services, right? We've been thinking about how to automate for quite a long time, but in many ways, the ability to automate, I think, to answer your question, is just becoming that little bit easier. Thinking back to the early days of trying to stitch together these different disparate systems was quite painful, and particularly in those days where you're dealing with workflows that are perhaps 30, 40 years old, and don't have the necessary documentation to understand how things are really working. Sometimes the easiest and quickest way to do things was to just build a bot, an RPA bot, and use some good old screen scraping skills and technology to try to bring things together. I think we're moving to a point in time where perhaps newer entrants into the space come equipped with API interfaces. You're able to integrate that little bit easier and faster, RESTful interfaces that are a bit easier to work with. But at the same time, I to give credit to my former carrier, and I think other insurance carriers are modernizing as well, and kind of looking at how do they replace core systems, and perhaps think about ripping off some of those temporary band-aids and modernizing from the ground up. So lots to digest, and then we start to get towards how do you create that environment to be ready for AI or Gen AI or whatever label we want to put on it. We know that you can fire up ChatGPT or any other Gen AI tool, ask it questions, do some fairly basic things quite well, but to operationalize that and bring it into your enterprise, it's a completely different story that requires more groundwork, which I'm sure you can also speak to in your experience at qBotica.
Absolutely, Chris. I think you're spot on, right? The ability to implement AI at scale with speed, accuracy, and lower costs is what is changing the game. And that's exactly what we're seeing at qBotica today. So at qBotica, we are working with multiple insurance companies to roll out AI COEs, or centers of excellences. And some of the insurance customers are small, some of them are huge, some of them are global companies. But when it comes to implementing AI, some of the challenges and some of the areas are kind of the same across these portfolio of companies. And you touched upon a very important point, which is, earlier it was more around Band-Aid, short-term fixes, small technology implementations. But now our customers are looking at longer-term rollouts because the ROI needs to be adequate to be able to sustain the pace at which they want to adopt AI. Right? So there are a couple of areas where we're seeing AI being implemented a lot within the insurance world. One is claims processing, and fraud detection. The second area would be underwriting, risk assessment of customers, new customers, claims, and so on. There's a lot of AI being built into customer service and customer service functions, the automation of those functions, for example, chatbots, virtual assistants, and so on. A lot of AI going into actuarial analysis, where ML or machine learning models process historical claims, market trends, and determine if the future claims are going to be of a higher value, lower value, and so on. And lastly, but probably the most important area we're seeing is AI being implemented in regulatory compliance and reporting.
Yeah.
So I want to pick your brains on compliance and reporting. This is an area not just in insurance, right? I'm seeing that in healthcare, in transportation, other industries as well. Where do you see AI coming in from from a regulatory and compliance in the compliance world? Is it more around just trying to meet the compliance, or are they going above and beyond in making sure that they're meeting every compliance requirements out there? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think a couple of things there, right? I think being able to go above and beyond is within the grasp of all of us. I think the challenge with heavily regulated industries, and when we're thinking about AI and how we use AI, from my opinion, and I think this is still an area that we're trying to solve for, is how to use AI in a compliant way. I kind of talked a little bit about RPA, and the magic of RPA is being able to kind of take a workflow, automate portions of that workflow, but still ultimately have visibility into what's being automated, right? What tasks are being automated. It's at that point, it's not perhaps so much about making decisions on behalf of or during that workflow. It's more connecting the dots. I think with AI, increasingly it's becoming smarter. It's we're starting to lean on it to make decisions on our behalf. So when you're talking about automating the underwriting workflows, or automating the claims journey and portions of the claims workflow, the temptation is going to be to lean on AI to do that for us.
Mm-hmm.
From a regulatory point of view, obviously, we need to have transparency. There needs to be a deep understanding around how those decisions are made. If I'm a consumer, if I'm a consumer and I drop my cell phone, my mobile phone, and break the screen, and I can automate the claim journey, I think that's a win. I think that's a huge win for the customer journey, right? It's a fairly standard claim to make. The challenge, I think, is when we start to get into the more complex, meaningful stuff. And you mentioned healthcare. I think we've all been on the ends, perhaps, of a claim that hasn't gone our way. If that's dropping a cell phone and the screen breaks and the claim is denied, you can sort of take it with a pinch of salt and say, okay, well, I'll follow up with that at some point and maybe try to understand what happened. If it's a medical claim, or if it's something that has a significant impact on my life, that's a different story, isn't it? And I think that we need to be cognizant of how AI is used, where it's used. What one use case or business outcome does not match all, right? And we need to kind of be diligent about where we use it within the customer journey, because I'm also a huge proponent of human-centered design, thinking about not just the technology piece, but the customer, the customer journey. And that's, it's important. And I think, again, the temptation is to lean on technology to do all of this for us, but at the same time, let's be sensitive to where we continue to use people as part of that journey.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I want to kind of expand on one of the last bullets you mentioned there around data sensitivity, right? Especially areas like healthcare insurance, where private personal information becomes very, very critical. There is apprehension among our customers, some of our customers, that implementing automation, implementing more AI would kind of expose data to multiple systems, and thereby, in some shape or form, get compromised downstream or down the line, right? So, in your experience, or in your world, have you seen AI kind of negatively impacting data in any way, or has it actually streamlined the flow of data, or the transformation of data across systems?
Look, I mean, for me personally, it's been a positive. it's been a positive influence. I think we're still quite early in seeing the end-to-end journey being fully automated. I think my experience with AI, I use ChatGPT on a daily basis, right? I like to think I'm a bit of an inventor. I have ideas, and how do you take those from ideation to implementation? Well, ChatGPT is a fantastic tool to help you do that. At the same time, I've also been around data-driven solutions where we can use LLMs to help. If we OCR a document, we can use LLMs to interrogate the document and extract intelligence from those documents. I think I've seen that work tremendously well for medical records, for insurance policies, for loss runs, binders. I mean, we're getting to the point where something that 5 or 6 years ago was very expensive and very complex to do is now almost becoming commoditized, right? If you have access to an AI engine that can OCR and use it, it's becoming much easier to digitize things that in the past were much more costly and time consuming to do. I think for me that has become a very successful use of AI. Image recognition, I think, is becoming incredibly smart and accurate. It's part of the claims journey. How do we take some of these components that perhaps in the past have worked very well as standalone pieces, and how do we start to put those together and as part of that puzzle, right? And I don't know if that answers your question. I've seen it used very well, perhaps in these piecemeal formats. The challenge I think we still face is putting all of this together within a workflow that is smart enough to say, yeah, this is where I'm going to use PK and his intelligence and his knowledge and everything he knows about insurance to make his job easier, right? How do we augment how PK works on a daily basis? It changes the conversation from replacing somebody to augmenting and helping them do their job to the best of their ability. I'm not convinced if we've really touched the surface there yet, thinking about this overarching end-to-end process of kind of stitching together people, process, technology, and data in a way that can elevate the insurance and customer experience. I think we're still in that phase where getting it wrong, it's going to negatively impact the customer journey. So we just need to be a little bit careful about what those next steps look like. And I'm also a lean Six Sigma guy, so I thrive kind of in the weeds, in the trenches, thinking about how people use systems and applications, and how do we make their lives that much easier.
Yeah, no, I kind of resonate with what you're saying, Chris. In fact, of the AI implementations we have done, qBotica has done for our insurance companies, there are a few areas where we are seeing a very high ROI by implementing AI, especially on the data side, right? So, for example, automated data integration. So AI systems can come in and automatically connect disparate data sources across multiple systems. Data quality tools integrating with AI systems to monitor data streams, identify missing values, anomalies, errors, and so on. Enhancing existing customer and risk data by adding external sources like social media data from social media platforms, public records, and so on. So we're seeing multiple ways of enhancing data quality and data privacy, data security by using AI. But you're very correct by saying that the full potential of being able to leverage the power of AI to manage data end to end has not been fully realized yet, and that's a great opportunity for all of us to take to our customers. Hey, look, you got all of these data lying around these buckets and bunches here and there. Now is the time to kind of put everything together using AI. And when I say AI, I'm not talking about a single tool like a UiPath or
Yeah.
Power Automate, right? It's got to be a combination of multiple tools, but AI can do that for our customers, and I think that's a great opportunity. Let me ask you this: so, if you were to put yourself in the shoes of, let's say, a CIO or a CTO of a small insurance company, right? And you've got the mandate to roll out AI in the next, I don't know, 6, 9, 12 months. What would your first steps be? How would you approach it? Assuming you've not done any kind of automation, any kind of AI so far, and this is the first foray into AI, what would you do?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's one that I've been asked before. I think it's I think back to the early days of RPA, and when we were kind of advising people on their automation strategy, and it was kind of like we started with saying, hey, look, before you start building a bot, any type of bot, let's understand your current state, right? Let's understand your existing workflows, and just try to capture how things work today from a process point of view, from a staffing point of view. What is Fred doing in the corner? What's Strand working on? Who's doing what within your organization, and what are their pain points, right? Get out onto the floor. I talked about Lean Six Sigma. There's a phrase, kind of doing the Gemba walk, and I learned this when I was during my time at Resource Pro. But it's just kind of like getting out onto the floor, understanding what people are doing today. What are the pain points? So before you go automate anything, just speak to people, right? Have a conversation, and I don't think that has changed in 7 or 8 years. It's you still need to understand how your people are working today, more so than ever, because potentially the impact on their job is going to be much greater with AI and smart automation than perhaps it was with RPA 6 years ago. So I think having that dialogue internally is critical. Understanding your processes today, your workflows, what are they doing? What's your current state? Map out the future state. Lean on design thinking strategies, customer journey mapping. Those things for me are still critical to understanding what do I automate, what do I leave as is, what do I potentially. So those pieces are still very important. And then Peak, I would say one more thing. Understand what your business outcomes are, right? What are you building towards? Because there's so much today. You open LinkedIn, any media publication, bad data in, garbage in, garbage out, blah blah blah. Yes, we have to be cognizant of data being correct and accurate, but it really depends on what the business outcome is. You don't have to perfect all of your data, and that's kind of madness. And we're ingesting so much more data from smart devices, from different third parties, that it's going to be very difficult to ever get to the point where it's perfect. So understand what those business outcomes are, and then understand as well what parts of your data need to be 99.9% accurate, and which other parts can you get away with some maybe perhaps less accuracy and still have a good business outcome. So these are all the pieces that I think go into it. But look, being aware of your teams internally, how their jobs will be impacted. There's a lot of fear around automation, more so than there ever has been with RPA. And I think it's, again, I said this probably 5 or 6 years ago, engage with HR, engage with your internal leadership teams, and have those conversations, because guarantee people are going to be worried about what their futures look like. Whereas we have an opportunity to actually bring them tools to help them work more effectively. So you can kind of flip that narrative if you have those conversations today.
Very true, very true. And I'd like to add to what you're saying here, based on my experience and the experience we've seen with qBotica's customers, right? So there are 3 things that I would advise customers that are starting this journey new. Start with high impact, low risk projects, right?
Yeah.
Pick cases that are simple, easy to implement, but have high ROI. So the selection of the right use cases almost always guarantees a win, long-term win. The second would be data, quality of data, data infrastructure, and data governance. Because as we all know, garbage in, garbage out, right? Unless good data, AI would fail in most cases. And then lastly, getting buy-in, getting all the strategic partnerships lined up within your organization, outside your organization, executive buy-in, communication. Like you rightly said, there's a lot of apprehension and skepticism around AI and loss of jobs. I strongly believe that AI is not going to result in loss of jobs. It's going to enhance everyone's quality of work and make them much more effective, much more productive. But we need to deal with that apprehension, and effective communication is very, very important. That's what I've seen from a qBotica experience standpoint. Let me ask you a final question. So within the insurance world, where would you, or what are some of the domain areas or functions you would advise new customers to get started on their AI journey? Is it more customer experience or claims management? Any specific areas you would recommend?
I think the customer one, you need to be careful. I think anything that's front end customer facing, you just need to be a little bit careful about what you're automating on that side of things. When I speak to agencies and brokers, I help them think about, how do you personalize some of what you're doing today? I think it's difficult. It's difficult to you want to have a balance between personalizing something, still maintaining a level of compassion and empathy with the customer, but then thinking about scale, right? I think it's sometimes it's difficult to do all of those things at once. As soon as we scale with technology, to some extent, we are perhaps relinquishing some of that personal connection. And that's, as an agent, that's your superpower, right? And so I think with AI, I would say, sure, let's look at some of those. Let's look at some of the simple things, sending an email. When it comes to 60 days, 90 days pre-renewal, how do we send out a communication that's accurate, transparent, and contains information that's useful to the customer? Those are kind of things that we can do today, I think, quite easily, and will have a significant impact with that relationship. But then still follow up with a phone call, or follow up with some other, maybe embed WhatsApp into that, right? So you're still building that one-to-one
human
communication, the human touch. Thank you. Yeah. And then I think, as I mentioned it earlier, when it comes to documents and thinking about PDFs and Excel documents and all of this stuff that we've been doing manually for so long, the technology is there. It's affordable to start thinking about how do you digitize parts of that journey. Loss runs, right? I mean, this is just a classic manual process that at this point in time can be automated to some part, to some extent. So I think, to answer your question, there are some customer facing things that you can automate, which will have high impact, perhaps low risk type of long-term impacts. But then there are also things internally from an operations point of view where you can say, okay, going beyond RPA, how do I now start to digitize some of these pieces internally? HR training, right? Onboarding is a massive one. It's a massive one, right? Because we're looking, we're seeing an industry where so many people are leaving and retiring, and then we're automating some of those entry-level positions. It's like, how do I get into this industry and learn on the job if those entry-level jobs are being eliminated? Well, then you start to think about, how do I build a dynamic learning, onboarding, LMS type system to help people onboard quickly, and maybe supplement some of those things that are that knowledge that is being lost. So stuff that won't necessarily impact you if it goes wrong in an incredibly in a negative way.
Very true, very true. My experience has been kind of very similar to what you mentioned. And this actually was implemented by a couple of customers, qBotica customers. One was around intelligent document processing, IDP, data extraction documents. Very straightforward, not complicated, does not impact the customer journey, at least on the front end, easy to implement, and quick ROI. So that's one area I would strongly recommend. The other areas would be around claims management, especially fraud. So fraud claims are a huge problem in the insurance industry today, whether it's healthcare, auto insurance, home insurance, you name it. And today we have the ability to implement advanced ML models that can quickly detect fraud in claims. So that's a quick area of win for implementing AI. So I totally agree with you. I think that's all we have time for today. So Chris, thank you so much for joining the chat today. Thanks to our audience for joining us today. And I hope all of you found this conversation to be very valuable. And we wish that you can apply this in your own AI transformation journey. If you guys have any follow-up questions or would like to continue the conversation, please reach out to me or to Chris or anyone on the qBotica side. We'll leave all of our links in the chat below. Always happy to connect and discuss how qBotica can help solve your AI challenges and get you started in your journey. Have a great day, and thank you again. Thanks, Chris.
Cheers, guys. Thanks, PK.